Good afternoon, ARC Teacher Network. It is the first Wednesday of the month, so you know why we are here. Listen, we have definitely been taking a look at the questions that have been coming in on our Facebook page, and guess what? Today is your day to get answers. On the screen with me today, I have two fabulous women that I would love to introduce to you if you don't already know. The first one that I have, and I don't know which way they appear on your screen, but on my screen, I have the top left corner, Ayana. Ayana Fair, would you raise your hand? This is Ayana Fair. She works with us here at American Reading Company. Her official title is the Director of Reading and Instruction, which kind of says it all, right? Director of Reading and Instruction. This is why we have her here to talk to you today. Fun fact, Ayana just completed her master's, and I'm going to read this off of my paper because I love it so much, but there's so many words and I always forget them. She has a master's in global and international education. Come on, I see y'all snapping. That's definitely dope. On the my other friend on the screen, which I'll probably be reintroducing to most of you, is the Miss Gina Klein. She is the Chief Product and Program Officer with American Reading Company. So these two ladies together are going to have the answers that you want. A fun fact about Gina is that she is not only one of the lead authors of the ERLA, she is also one of the authors and the writers for ArtCore. So together, these ladies have the answers that you all need. Who puts the books in the baskets? Ayana. Who writes the curriculum? Gina. So today they're going to unpack for you and give you some strategies on how to work through Unit 2. They're going to give you some key moves to make sure that you are successful. So I'm going to mute myself and allow these ladies to lead us in our conversation this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us, y'all.
Hi, everyone. So today, the topic we wanted to talk about today is how do I set my students up for success with the research? One of the things that I noticed as I was monitoring the Facebook page is several people were saying the graphic organizers seem hard. My students are struggling with the concepts on the page. They don't understand the concepts, so they're having trouble with the research and many other things. But that was the one that we heard the most. And it's one that I've heard every time I've been in a school coaching for ArtCore, and even before it was called ArtCore, that was the thing that came up over and over again in year one. So we wanted to talk about some key strategies for ensuring students succeed at their research. And Ayana and I have both picked a unit that we love to use as an example. But Ayana's going to run the whole screen part for us, I think, right, Ayana?
Yep. So you want to pull up the research card or the FPO first?
Let's plug the FPO and let's look at the front of the FPO, the very first page. So can we look at the first page that shows all the awesome. Okay, so on the final project organizer, this first page is just the overview of all of the research questions. And I think one of the things to remember is that especially when we think about the difference between a 3rd grade reading level and an 8th grade reading level is vocabulary and background knowledge. That the main point of these units is not that students learn any specific piece of information. It's that students become experts in science and social studies so that they have the background knowledge to read at grade level in 8th grade and high school, and to write and to think as citizens too. So I'm using this American Revolution unit, and I have the core text here, and we have the final project organizer on the screen. So as you may know, if you are already in Unit 2 is an informational research unit. There's a science or socialist topic. This happens to be American Revolution. And in each unit, students are asked to pick their own topic to research. So here's the first place things go wrong. They can go off the rails if, for example, in the American Revolution, A New Nation, we say pick an event. If you let students pick a person, or I can't imagine what else they might pick. I don't know, something else. The research questions and the graphic organizers won't scaffold their research the same way. So right away, they'll be struggling potentially. So have them pick an event. How specific is that event? Well, it depends. And you'll look at the books available to students and how much online research they can do and their reading levels. And it might be that your struggling readers are doing the American Revolution as their event. That's a possibility. You can make it big or smaller. Obviously, the Boston Tea Party has the most resources of almost anything, and the drafting of the Constitution. So every kid picks an event, and then for each research question, I, as the teacher, my job is to make sure kids understand the key concepts, so that they're then going to apply to their own research. Why do they pick an event? Because it's more fun to be the only person in the room who knows the most about something, and not to have everybody looking for the same answer. So one of the reasons we pick a research topic is so that we're not just finding the answer. There are lots of answers, and we're building knowledge together. So in American Revolution, New Nation, let's just say that I'm going to be teaching research question number 3 today, causes, or the social, political, economic, and military issues that sparked this event. Well, that's a big question. And why is that the question? Because it's the standard. If you look at the middle school social studies standards for pretty much any state, understanding social, political, and economic issues, and understanding the causes of the American Revolution are 2 of the key social studies concepts that students are supposed to master. Each of these questions embeds key standards, which is why they're written this way. And they are hard. They're grade level content. So when I look at this question, think, okay, what is it students may have trouble with? Not are they going to know what the Boston Tea Party or the Boston Massacre or writing the Constitution, not what do they not know about those specific events, but what do they not know about the concepts? So I'm going to go to the graphic organizer for that. Ayana is going to take us to the organizer for research question 3. She's driving because she's faster at it, and I'm really appreciative.
I have it. Just give me one moment.
Because each of these organizers is designed to help teachers and students think more deeply about the research question.
Maybe.
Maybe.
If we can do the right. Okay, here you are.
It's because I said you were faster at it.
Right.
That's why it froze. Okay, so causes and multiple perspectives. Well, it's a lot of things to do, but let me just think about what is it I want kids to work on first, or the key issues, social, political, economic, or military, that sparked this event. So on the far left, students are going to need to be able to identify multiple issues, put each one in each of those boxes. Then they're going to have to figure out what 2 sides were on that issue, which, can I just say how important this is as civics education, not just for the American Revolution, but for today, to understand different perspectives on an issue. So I'm excited to teach. I love this unit. I'm such a history nerd. I'm excited to teach this. But the first thing I need to do is make sure kids understand issues, social, political, economic, or military, those words, and that they understand those issues about the American Revolution in general, because probably they all relate to their individual events. So what are we going to read to learn about that? To be clear, we are not expecting teachers to know the answers to this stuff. Each unit includes a core text that teaches the content of each of the research questions. Okay, let's just be clear. These are authentic books. They're not perfectly written to our units. They don't do the best job of teaching all 7 research questions. They might teach 5 of them really well, which is why we also include the anchor titles. And the anchor titles, one each that you get as the teacher, are specifically chosen to fill in the gaps. So I looked at my core text first, and here's George v. George, which is usually the core text in middle school for American Revolution. And I went to this section on the trouble with taxes, and I really like this section because it says, so what stirred up the hornet's nest in the first place? It all began over money and over the rights of citizens too. And the reason I love this section is it's going to bring up economic, money, and political rights of citizens. And so I'm going to ask my students to read this section with me and connect money to economics and rights of citizens to politics. We're going to work as a team to read this section and fill out this organizer for the entire American Revolution. Just on these two issues, money, which will turn out to be taxes, but money and rights of citizens. Once we've done that as a group, then they're ready to go off and look for, we might just say, how was money involved in your issue? Money, economic issues, and how in your event, and how was the rights of citizens, political issues involved in your event? Go look for just those two causes. Might shrink it to those two because they're here in this text. I didn't have to make the organizer easier. I just did a portion of the concepts. Oh, that was the end of my speech about that, Ayana. I don't know, is there anything else to say about American Revolution and teaching it and then applying it to your own events?
No, I think you pretty much hit it. I think especially with your added layer of, I didn't change it. I didn't do any additional work as the teacher to make it easier or change the question, but I just gave my students a scaffold on how to do this issue and then how to apply it inside of their actual FPOs themselves.
Awesome. All right, so I think you are going to give us an example of how to do this in weather, right?
Correct, I am. So Gina gave you a bit on the American Revolution and New Nation, and now I'm going to talk about an elementary thematic unit of weather and climate. So first we're going to look at the research card, and I'm just going to go with question 1. It's pretty simple, straight to the point, define and describe. Do your students know what define and describe means first and foremost? If they don't, then we need to do a little bit of work on showing them what that means. How do we define a weather phenomenon? Have we chosen which weather phenomenon we're going to study? Because that's what weather and climate is going to be all about. A student choosing the weather phenomenon of their choice and then researching that and creating their own informational text at the end, right? So we want to make sure that we have that end goal in mind. What do my students need to do and be able to do by the end of this unit? The first thing we need them to be able to do is describe whatever that weather phenomenon is. And with that being said, we're going to go to their FPOs. Maybe again. Like I said, maybe we'll go to the FPOs because, okay, there we are. So for research question 1, this is just one of our FPOs, but I'm going to use this one as the example. Much like what Gina was explaining about American Revolution, we need to look at the FPO and understand it for ourselves as the teacher. What is it saying, and what do my students already know? Do they know do my students know what a weather phenomenon is? Have I explained to them what they are and what kind of text they're going to see in the classroom that might serve as those weather phenomena that they can do that research for? That's the first thing that I will want to do as the teacher. Next, I want to choose the text that I'm going to use to help them define and describe a weather phenomenon. And as the teacher, I'm the lead researcher, right? And we're going to do this together. So I might use my core text, which would be an exemplar pack at this moment, and it will call out for you research question 1 and your exemplar pack. So that really gives you a good start to your unit with unit 2, because it in the exemplar pack, it calls out that specific research question and that the text that you can use to be that lead researcher. Or I can go into my thematic unit baskets and find a grade level text and read that as well with my students. For example, I might choose to do hurricanes as the lead researcher. And as a class, we would define and describe a hurricane, for example. So then I would work with my students and we would fill out, what does this weather phenomenon look like? So what does a hurricane look like? How does it develop? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? And we would do this together as a class. But the next thing I would do would let my students go, right? And I think that this is such a key part of our core, is thinking about who needs to sit here with me and continue to do the FPO together, and who needs to go because they understand grade level instruction and they can do their research and they can work on the final project organizer on their own. And who can I group together, right? Who's doing all of the same topics? All of these kids are doing hurricanes. I'm putting them in breakout groups. All of these students are doing hurricanes. I'm putting them all in a pod near each other, socially distanced, so that they can do this research together. I have one student who is reading on grade level instruction. They can read, they can make sure that all of the students are getting access to that kind of text and building that background knowledge on that particular weather phenomenon that they chose. And I think that that's such the critical piece of our core, is that they still have that choice, even if they aren't reading on that white level independently. They can have another student help them, or they can help each other kind of to build that background knowledge through conversation and reading together.
Ayana, that's making me think, as you and I were talking about this last night, about, as you were saying, differentiation for students. What about the student who's reading at 1 green?
Right.
And I think that is the thing that is really a thing that I want to say to teachers is the research, the graphic organizers are there as scaffolds and supports for a student who is, think about the student's reading levels and writing go together really closely. If your phonics skills in reading and your phonics skills in writing are going to be connected. So the last thing we need a 1 green reader to do is to spend a lot of time writing things they can't read back later because they're copying it out of the text, or they don't have the words themselves, so they're pulling from other places. Then they can't read it, so they can't use it to turn their notes into their final project.
Yeah.
Let's make sure that what you do in Art Core is never busy work. A 1 green reader doing weather in 2nd or 3rd grade, the thing they need most is to get to 2 green, 1 blue, and 2 blue as fast as humanly possible. Weather's great, and you can use weather to do that, but don't let the graphic organizers or the boxes get in the way of the thing that matters most, which is that the kids get to grade level and that they like doing it. So if I'm thinking about a 1 green reader in weather, I would probably say have them every day draw and write a piece of their answer.
Yep.
Forget the notebook, forget the notes. Draw and write, because writing and drawing actually, but writing is going to improve their phonics skills, and I can use writing to improve their phonics skills. I can coach them on using the sight words or power words they know as the spelling patterns for word families, which is how they'll get from greens to blue the fastest. So I can coach them to do that in their writing every day and in their reading. And then at the end of each week, they have 5 pages, a picture in 1 sentence, 1 or 2 sentences for their book, and they're not frustrated.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was going to say, Gina. That piece about engagement or frustration is another piece about that, right? If a kid cannot access what is happening on the final project organizer, they're going to be frustrated. They're not going to be engaged. They're not going to want to participate in this unit. And the goal is to get them on grade level instruction. It is not necessarily that they fill out every single piece of the final project organizer, and that no one should be really filling out every single piece of the final project organizer, right? Like, it's not meant that you are filling every single box out. It's using it as a way to get to your end goal of creating that informational text that you've developed that expertise about on whatever the topic is, whether it's American Revolution or weather and climate or bugs or whatever it is that your unit 2 is focused on.
I want to jump in real quick. You guys have already given a list of things that I'm going to remember to talk to teachers about. One question that someone hit me in my inbox with, and Gina kind of talked about this, if I have two students or a group of students who have the same theme, the same animal, the same weather, whatever it is, can I pair them even if they aren't at the same color level? So if I have a 1G student and he or she is doing, I don't know, thunderstorms. However, there is another student who is doing thunderstorms, but he or she is at the white level. Could they be in a group together, or does that not work?
I would actually say it's almost imperative that they be in a group together. Remember, the last thing we ever want to do is use ERLA levels as segregation.
Not a life sentence.
This is not a life sentence. And the child who's a 1 green or 2 green or 1 blue reader is no less intelligent and has no less capacity than the child who's currently reading at grade level. They have the child reading at grade level has a head start, but we've got to get that help that other child catch up, and they have the brains and the capacity to do it. So this is one of the best opportunities to demonstrate to students that we know, not just believe, we know that every one of them is smart, is brilliant, and has the capacity to succeed, and that they are all deserve the rigor and the intellectual challenge of grade level work. Put students in groups together regardless of color level. This is the time for that. Sorry, I have a soapbox on this one.
No, I love it. I love it.
And who better to collaborate with than your peers, right? That you can learn from, that you already talk to and already engage in so many ways, just the same way that Gina and I and Sherry and I will have conversations about whatever it is that we need to collaborate on as peers, because Sherry might know a bit more than me on this particular thing, and she's going to challenge me and push me and teach me how to learn whatever it is that I need to know next.
That's right. Awesome. And another thing that you said, it's not necessarily a question, but I hear it all the time for teachers. So I want to loop back to it. Gina, when you were talking about American historical fiction, you said, teachers, we're not asking that you come to the table with all of this knowledge. American Reading Company and ArtCore is designed to both deepen the learning of students and also teachers. So this is the way that teachers will come and they'll say, well, how am I supposed to know when I sit back and talk to students about all of these different things? Well, you're not. You ask them pointed questions, right? To make sure they're going in the right direction. And that helps you to not have to read every single book that every child is using in your classroom. So definitely lean heavily on that, teachers. We're not asking you to come to the table with all the answers. We're giving you the framework, the layout of what should be answered in each of these units.
You know, the thing that this brings up for me a lot is so many of us, our internal fear of not being good enough, of being caught out as not knowing something we should already know. And I think that ArtCore sometimes in the thematic units, it's a little nerve-wracking when you're like, ooh, I don't know that. Well, everybody thinks that I'm not qualified, right? Here's the thing. You succeeded. You're a qualified teacher. You're smart and capable. You don't have to know all of this stuff. You learned it at one point, maybe you forgot it, you learn it again. The goal of this is not to test teachers on our knowledge of any of these things, but to help us model curiosity and investigation. And even more, this is something Bob Probst says all the time that I really appreciate so much, the capacity to change our minds. If you can model, I thought I knew this. Wow, I thought the Boston Tea Party was a rebellion about higher taxes. Wait, it was actually because they made the tax so cheap, the tea so cheap? Wait, that doesn't make any, that's so different. I didn't know that. Model relearning.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think you're right. We do an excellent job of stepping on toes. I'm guilty of it. Woo! When I first came on, I was afraid to be assessed because I didn't know where I would fall, right? As an adult reader. But you have to be, you have to shake things up a bit in order to learn. I also love what Ayana was adding to the conversation with regard to matching students that do not have like color levels, right? We as adults, right, we go to one another and ask each other questions when we don't know. So why would we take that away from our students? So it's another way. I get a lot of teachers that say, well, you know, my kids, they don't really like when they're in the green level and everybody else is in the white level, right? It's okay, because you, buddy, you can draw a dinosaur, but guess what? He can tell you what the dinosaur, the history of dinosaurs, right? Together, y'all are a knockout collab. So anyhow, are there any other things that you can think of that would kind of help teachers that are, you know, trying hard to make it through Unit 2?
I think the one thing I would want to add is just about using other forms of media as well. And I think that's one thing that we didn't really touch on. We just kind of said, this is what you need to do with the final project organizers. But I do want to talk a little bit about like engagement and using other forms of media to get your students excited. I find that teachers who are genuinely engaged in the unit that they're doing with their students, also it shows in their students and their excitement engagement inside of a unit. So for example, one teacher, she was working in weather, so she showed her students some tsunamis and thunderstorms like as a video, right, to get them excited about it. And they were so hyped to get ready to choose their own weather phenomenon. But I thought that just using other forms of media like videos, like websites, like photos, just that don't box the kids into just these baskets are the only way to do research, because that's not real. Like everyone does research all over the place, including us. So I think that would be the major thing that I want to say to teachers. Like, you have permission to be free, you know, use the framework as the guide, but really make sure that you're speaking to the students in front of you for what they need to get them on grade level or above. That is the main point of the units.
Right.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that about media, because one of the focus standards, if you're using the Common Core version, one of the focus standards of this is standard 7, which is integrating multiple types of informational visuals, diagrams, charts, videos, etc. Weather scientists go chase tornadoes. They don't just sit reading books. We're clearly not going to drive the kids around chasing tornadoes. We're not going to get in the same car right now, probably. But, you know, we should be watching videos and looking at diagrams and websites. And this is actually the thing that's potentially the most exciting about being virtual, is the opportunity, not everyone is, but where we are, the opportunity to share those virtual resources together differently.
Question just came in, ladies. Perfect, because we're almost out of time. I'm going to read it really quickly. Says, can you please help us to better understand the architecture of this unit? Where do I start reading the framework? What should I focus on, especially in the present virtual changing context?
Okay, well, so here's the thing. In the present changing context, and I'm going to say this as an ARC leader, ARC coach, and also as a mom. Number one is that the kids feel like you love them and that they have a community. Number two is that they are loving reading. Because if we can't get anything else done, let's make sure kids are reading for an hour or two a day. Yes, on weather or American Revolution, but also Diary of a Wimpy Kid, or anything in the world they want to read. So first, they feel connected to you and their community, they feel loved. Second, that they are readers and they're talking about and loving reading. Third, that they maybe learn something really cool about this topic. That'd be awesome. Fourth, do you see, like, okay, of course, in an ideal situation, we have 157 things here, but we are in a pandemic. We are in every kind of crisis. We have to also be kind to ourselves and our kids. Fourth is students are learning to think in organized ways, which will deliver organized writing. And I don't mean that we're following a structure. I mean that we're thinking in organized ways. What is my main idea or my point? What evidence actually supports that main idea versus this main idea? That's thinking for life. That's preparing students for anything they want to do. It's not filling in boxes. It happens to be one of the writing standards in the Common Core because it's a life skill.
Right.
But it's not the graphic organizer, it's the thinking. If you can get all of that done, if you get all of that done, then okay, yes, you can have them do a pre, mid, and post where they read and write and you look at their work together and see what you can improve on. I would look at that. But, and that they all produce something they're proud of at the end of the unit on their weather phenomena. And I just want to say another thing, which is if they get bored of researching their weather phenomena, make it a tornadoes versus hurricanes.
Mm-hmm.
Let them write a fiction story at the end. Let them help somebody else. Don't let them get bored.
Yeah. Yeah. That is phenomenal advice. I think that some teachers that are new to using ArtCore struggle just in the beginning of getting students excited because they're thinking so much about the final project. But if you get kids excited about what they're actually going to learn about first, the other stuff will fall into place. We've had a couple teachers on this year so far with our ARC Teacher Network that have shown different ways that they're getting kids excited. They go on virtual field trips. They're making sure their classrooms match the themes. They're getting on the phone or Zoom with authors that have written the books. There's tons of ways and tons of things that because of where we are in this pandemic that we now have access to that we wouldn't normally have. So definitely give yourself some grace. Listen, I know we're a little bit over, but there's one last question that I do want you guys to take a look at. The question is, what would you suggest for pacing as far as RQs are concerned? How much time should students spend on RQs?
Well, I always get, go ahead, Ayana, go ahead.
I feel like that's such a tough one. And the reason why I say that is because, right, like there is a pacing guide that we have deliberately created and curated that is inside of your framework. And at the same time, I think that there's room for maneuvering it differently based on what your students know, right? So like if your students already know how to define and describe their weather phenomenon, like off the bat, maybe that's not the question that we're focusing on this week. And we're focusing on question 2, which is saying, where is it in the water cycle? Because that might be the thing that my kids don't know yet about is like the water cycle. So I need to focus more of my mini lesson to be focused on what exactly is the water cycle, and then how does this phenomenon play into that. So I think giving yourself some flexibility based on what your students can do is what might give some people some relief. Gina?
Go do every research question as long as kids are interested in it.
Or that.
Or that.
And then move on. What I would say is be careful about skipping or cutting them. Especially if you look at the way they work, usually they build towards the hardest in terms of conceptual ideas. So we start with what we think is going to be a quick win. Define and describe your weather phenomena. This should not be rocket science.
Right.
And we get to what are some of these ways we can reduce the environmental impact of these hazards. Well, that's huge social environmental impact. If you skip questions 2, 4, 5, and 6, students aren't going to be able to answer 7.
Right.
So you probably want to do a little bit of each one, but as soon as students are bored, you might come back to it later. This structure is not a straitjacket.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, our frameworks are bound. They come to you bound, right? But your teaching does not have to be bound to the framework. You take the framework and you get the ideas and then you expand upon them and make it work for the students that are in front of you. We sincerely hope you got something out of this message today. If there are questions that you have that haven't been answered during this time, please put them in the chat. Definitely send us emails. Some folks have started to message me privately. Totally fine. We want to make sure that you get the answers to the questions that you have. Remember also that your American Reading Company executive coach is always there. He or she can be emailed and they can some quick answers, or your dad, right? Your director of academic design. But you're never alone out there. Please let us know what questions you have, and we'll be happy to answer them. Listen, we will be back on the third Wednesday of December, 12/16 at 5 p.m. with two teachers to end out our calendar year on how they are keeping students engaged by presenting their best selves. Listen, you are not going to want to miss this presentation from these two gentlemen in Guilford County Schools at Faust Elementary School. They're going to get you pumped, they're going to get you hyped, and you're going to come back in January with a bag full of tools that you've learned. We hope you have a safe afternoon, and we will see you on 12/16. Thank you, Ayana and Gina.